Chairman Mike Rogers, welcome to the show.
Be with you.
Well, we love having you on this show, and we're really excited to have a conversation with you today because the House Armed Services Committee, the committee which you chair, passed an historic bill last week, national defense, and as part of the reconciliation measure. This is $150 billion that came out in a bipartisan vote from your committee. That's going to be wrapped up in a larger reconciliation package. And it's really a down payment, as you've outlined in your press release and statement, on national defense. And maybe you could just take a minute about what you want to emphasize most. It covers ships, it covers missile defense, it covers munitions, industrial base issues, but why this is so significant, Chairman.
Thanks for having me on, but it's so significant because we are at defense spending levels that are the lowest since before World War II, over 80 years. And it's dangerously low. And, that is an invitation to hostilities from our adversaries. So seeing this $150 billion targeted for defense acknowledges that reality. That reality, along with the fact that we now know our adversaries are not working alone. We've got Russia and China and North Korea and Iran have formed a new axis of evil in coordination with one another. And so we have this huge and building threat. We have a diminished capability and capacity within our own defense infrastructure. So first acknowledging that, which the president has done, and now significantly making an effort to start to address our lack of capabilities or our shortcomings with this $150 billion. More, as much as anything, is an acknowledgement and a serious step in the direction of trying to remedy our circumstance.
Well said. I mean, the international security environment is the most challenging we've seen in generations. You probably have to go back to the Cold War for the reasons you outlined. Our industrial capacity, we haven't recapitalized our industrial capacity in generations. Even Ronald Reagan, when he engaged in that military buildup, he was relying on industrial capacity that the United States had, the military had from the Vietnam War. That is not the case now. And defense spending is at its all-time low, below 3% of GDP. I want to start with the end of your bill because I think it captures the most significant part of why reconciliation, why this measure, it's kind of an arcane inside the beltway sort of thing, really is so special and different, particularly from the annual defense authorization bill, which you lead and shepherd through the Congress every year. The last section is a limitation on the availability of funds, which is kind of a misnomer because the funds are available through 2034. To me, that's really significant because it's not the sort of thing where we normally only have a year or 2 years to spend the funds. The capital funding that's provided here now can give industry and other players the confidence that money is going to be there out until 2034. Do I have that correct, Mr. Chairman?
Really, it is true, but you just hit on a point that your listeners and viewers need to be aware of, and you brought this to my attention a while back. We have allowed our defense industrial base to atrophy to the point that they're going to have some help, some runway to build back up capability to take the resources we have and turn it into goods and services that we need. We now have 6 prime defense contractors. And as you know, when Reagan did his buildup in the 80s, we had 51.
Yeah.
So there's going to need a lot of care and attention to get us back to where we can produce the kind of things we need to keep us free and safe. So this bill has some language that tries to get after that issue.
$33+ billion in shipbuilding, absolutely critical. We are way below where we need to be. Right now, our United States Navy is engaged in hostilities in the Red Sea, leading the fight against the Houthis. Here in this bill, there's $85 million for steel for shipbuilding industrial base. There's $400 million for shipbuilding and building campuses. It's all the sort of things that allows the infrastructure of our national defense to be modernized and expanded. And it's not limited to shipbuilding alone. Of course, you're dealing with the same sort of thing in terms of expansion of industrial base as it relates to munitions, which of course are being expended both in terms of U.S. operations in the Red Sea against the Houthis, but also in support of Ukraine. That's been provided in the past. So we're just expending this stuff and we can't replace it at a clip that keeps us safe where deterrence is realized. How do you feel about the investments in terms of munitions and whether we're going to realize the capacity increases we need?
Well, it's going to take sustained investment. That's one of the things it's my top priority this year and for this cycle in Congress is to try to drive home that we are going to have to make significant continued investments in defense to get us back to a point where we can deter adversaries. The $150 billion, I think, is a great symbol, but the underlying NDAA this year is going to have a large funding increase in it as well. It's my expectation to mark up this year's NDAA at 5% of increase over inflation, which in and of itself is going to be a almost $60 billion increase over the FY 2025 authorization. Together with the $150 billion from reconciliation, that put us at a little over $1.1 trillion in defense spending in the first year of President Trump's term. It's my goal by the fourth and final year of his term that we're over preferably around 4.5% of GDP being spent on defense, which under our calculations, that's 4.5%. Under NATO calculations, that would be 5% because they count things we don't count. And that's consistent with what President Trump said he expected of all NATO members a couple of months ago when he was in Europe.
A lot you just said there, Mr. Chairman. I just want to kind of revisit it for a second because what you made quite clear in this just limited conversation is that reconciliation is step one. And of course, there are a lot of steps that have to happen to see that measure get through, a lot on the domestic side. But let's be optimistic here. And we could, foresee a time where that reconciliation bill goes through and there's $150 billion. But you just said that is actually just a first step. After that, of course, you have the annual defense authorization appropriations. What I heard you say is that you want to have a 5% increase above inflation for this fiscal year. Now, as you know well, the President's Office of Management and Budget, OMB, shared its top line request for this fiscal year, and it wasn't at the number you're describing. Actually, it's a flat or fails to keep pace with inflation. So it would require the Congress and your committee to go above President Trump's request, and it's roughly just south of $900 billion. And you're talking about something that would be north of around $1 trillion. So that's going to be a challenge. And give me a sense of the feeling amongst your members of your committee in realizing that. I get, given the challenges we're facing, it's going to require that level of investment to realize the peace through strength President Trump ran on.
The number that the OMB office sent out was recklessly irresponsible. It basically flatlined defense spending, and when you factor in inflation, it's a cut. And it's OMB's aspiration to flatline defense spending for the whole term. That's not going to happen. The good news is nobody at OMB has a voting card or a gavel. We will decide what defense spending will be in the Congress, and I'm going to do what I think is responsible. I'm going to do what I can to help President Trump achieve the aspirations and goals that he has set for all NATO members and his desire for us to have peace through strength here at home and to get us out of the wars that we're in and keep us out of wars in the future. You only do that with peace through strength. We cannot achieve his aspirations at the budget numbers that came out of OMB. And we've made that very clear that we're not going to do that. Roger Wicker and I have been talking a lot, and we're speaking with one voice on defense spending. And we're going to do what we need to do to make sure we're free and safe, and we give the president what he needs to keep us out of wars in the future.
Well, President Trump is lucky to have you and Chairman Wicker as the respective chairs of the Armed Services Committees of the Congress, you in the House, Senator Wicker in the Senate, with such a clear-eyed view on what's required and a commitment to realize the peace through strength he ran on. You know, you talk about by the end of his term, you want to be at over 4% GDP with a GDP in 2023 of $27 trillion north of that. I mean, you're really talking about sizable defense increases. You know me, I'm right behind you, cheering you the whole way on that. I think it's absolutely required and long overdue. But there's skeptics out there, some on your committee, some in the administration, certainly those in the press and in the think tank world. Do you think the Department of Defense, given the glide path of growth that you would like to see come to the Pentagon with the authorizations and appropriations you intend to realize and deliver, do you think the Pentagon can spend that responsibly where it will be able to execute that authorization and those appropriations so it's going to the sorts of things you are prioritizing, right? Growing the force, realizing the modernization, expanding our capacity, transitioning technology to the new autonomous systems? Do you think that could happen given the level of increase you're contemplating?
With President Trump's leadership, I do. I actually do think that. But we don't really have a choice. I mean, that's just the fact that people have to acknowledge the world is really dangerous right now, and we can either get in front of that threat and be prepared to deter it, or we can suffer from it in a few years or in the near future.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. You know, there is this view, and I'm sure there are voices in the House chamber in which you sit on the Republican side that tend to take the perspective that if the military grows too strong, if we make investments at the levels, Chairman, that you're contemplating, somehow that is a danger to the United States because it invites aggression. It's almost this notion that if you are a defense hawk, you're actually a warmonger. That is a sort of rhetoric that's being bandied about, certainly outside the Capitol. What do you say to that sort of mindset?
They don't know what they're talking about. They just don't. The people that work in our wheelhouse in the national security space know that the only way you deter aggression is through strength. And it doesn't matter if you start at world history, page 1, and read to present, or the Bible at page 1 and read through Revelation. That is always what has deterred aggression and never invited aggression. So you just got to recognize there's all kind of people in Congress and in this town, for that matter, with some really silly ideas. That doesn't mean they know what they're talking about.
Well, I think those sources, both from the Bible and world history up and through the 20th century with the Cold War, certainly as the exclamation point reinforces what you've just said. Now, at the end of your reconciliation bill, there's another section, which of course hasn't gone unnoticed, but I think a lot of people will be focusing on, which is a plan required 45 days after this bill would be enacted. The committees, your committee and the Senate Armed Services Committee would want a plan from the Department of Defense in terms of how they can execute this. And of course, any bill that's passed out of your committee, just like any bill that's passed out of the Congress, requires the executive branch to partner with them, in this case, the Pentagon. Perhaps characterize how this was received by Secretary Hegseth and conversations between you and Secretary Hegseth and making sure that should this bill be enacted, just like the defense authorization bill, it's being enacted and executed in a fashion that meets your expectations and gives you confidence that it will be executed along the lines of what was approved by the committee.
I have had conversations with Secretary Hegseth as late as being yesterday. And, they've got some ideas that they're suggesting for the path forward. And I've told them that we'll be happy to talk with them about what we think is reasonable and try to help them achieve the things that we think are prudent and responsible as far as the path forward. We're not going to agree to everything that's being suggested out of that building. But I can say that he has been very excited about our goals for defense spending that I've laid out for you, because I've laid them out for him, and he completely agrees. They are all needed. We just have to get them through the political process. And I do want to make sure that you recognize that we believe that not only we're going to have this reconciliation opportunity this year, we believe we will have another opportunity next year for a second reconciliation bill, which will provide another year of significant funding over and above the base bill that we put out each year.
Mr. Chairman, if you accomplish what you've described here, reconciliation that you've already passed to your committee, a second reconciliation next year, in addition to the authorization bills that you've described at the levels of spending, 5% real growth in this coming year, rising up to over at least 4% GDP by the end of President Trump's term, it will be a monumental and historic shift in our military, in our national defense, and American leadership in the world as a result of that strength. And it would be almost without precedent if that were to be realized. And I no doubt, I see the pin on your lapel, not just your congressional pin, but the Space Force below it. Of course, you are the brainchild of that. And so I have every confidence that you can accomplish what we want to do in the budget on the basis of what you did by being the key advocate in seeing the Space Force come to life. You know, one other question as we wrap up this conversation with Chairman Mike Rogers of Alabama on the House Armed Services Committee is a mindset on strategy. And you can't talk about budgets in a vacuum, as you know well. And I've had the good fortune of testifying before your committee on strategy. I know you care deeply about the approach, the outlook the Department of Defense and more broadly our national security agencies take towards dealing with the threats in the world. We have not seen a defense strategy out of the Trump administration just yet. It's only been 100 plus days. But there seems to be a couple of different approaches that may play out, and it goes to national defense. One approach would be we should prioritize the Indo-Pacific, dealing with the preeminent threat of the People's Republic of China. But it takes a view that says, well, we're not going to have a military large enough to do anything more than that. So we need to do China first, and then we'll have to absorb risk in the other parts of the world. And you were outlining the axis of evil just before. We won't be able to deal as much, at least militarily, with the Irans of the world and the Russias of the world. Seems to me, I won't speak for you, I'd like you to respond, that with the sort of national defense investment you're contemplating, you're not someone who's going to back or would support a China alone defense strategy.
And I can't overstate this. Big things don't happen if you don't think big. And we've got a president who thinks big, and he wants to do big things. So I don't think he's going to be in any way intimidated by the goals that we've set for defense spending and for correcting the terrible situation that we are in right now with this diminished capability. So nothing that we're talking about doing is beyond the realm of what is doable. So I have every confidence with his leadership. We can get to where we need to be. I also want to see us have a greater partnership with our allies. You know, we can walk and chew gum. We can deal with the threat in the Indo-Pacific and continue to keep our eye on and work in Europe, to be cognizant of and push back against the aggression from Russia. We can also, at the same time, keep a focus on the Middle East and try to push back on and contain the aggression from Iran. But we need to be very cognizant of what's going on in the African continent and as well with China's activity. We can do all those things. None of those things are beyond the realm of reasonable as far as what we can take on. I think it's a false choice to say that if we're going to meet the challenge in the Indo-Pacific, we have to shrink our capability elsewhere. That's thinking small. There's nothing about President Trump that thinks small. He thinks big, and I think Congress should do the same thing, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Think big. That's certainly the way the president talks, and it's great. And I'm sure the president's thrilled that he has you and Senator Wicker thinking big in the committees that oversee the Pentagon and manage the authorization bill, the annual authorization bill. To those who think we can't afford this, there's the fiscal hawk against the defense hawk. We haven't hit on this directly. You note that this is the lowest level of defense spending we've seen since World War II. We were at 6.5% GDP at the time Reagan was doing his buildup. You're contemplating south of 5%. So historically, we've been there before. Actually, we've done a lot more. Is there something about our fiscal picture that gives you pause that we can't afford this level of investment in national defense?
The fact is, there's nothing more important than our ability to keep ourselves safe and free. The truth is, nothing else matters if you're not safe and free. And we have people that want to kill us out there. That's just a fact. They want to wipe us off the planet. And we can either take that risk seriously and meet it, or wish that we had later when we suffer from that. So I recognize there are fiscal hawks in the Congress, and they're right. We have a spending problem, but it is not the spending problem that's emanating from the defense of this nation. It has to do with the entitlements that we have in place that have just really grown at a pace that we have to deal with it. We have to be real about it. But the idea that we're going to solve the nation's financial problems on discretionary spending is just silly. And we just have to grow up and deal with that. But it is not the defense portion of discretionary spending that is our challenge. And it's one that we can meet and we will meet.
Chairman Rogers, thank you so much for coming back on Reaganism. When the Congress or when anybody talks about peace through strength, I hope they give you the microphone first.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Take care.
Take care.